So even though I didn't read that many this month, I don't remember a lot of my thoughts on them. So this is going to be a very interesting readathon. Readathon? What? Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my November wrap-up. So this is about to be the shortest wrap-up, maybe not ever, but for sure of this year. I did not read a whole lot in November. Actually, like, my reading has significantly dipped in the latter half of the year. I think it's just burnout, honestly, as far as like the amount of books that I've been reading, because for the past couple of years I've been able to churn out like on average 10 to 12 books a month, and recently I just haven't been feeling the need to plow through as many. Not to say I didn't read some great books, because I did, and I'm going to continue to like have ridiculous plans, but I think my reading amount is starting to slow down a little bit, which is totally fine. So we read 6 books in the month of November, which is great. Very excited about the books that I read. I did some fun reading vlogs. Well, I did a fun reading vlog, and yeah, there's a lot of the same in this video. So I will leave everything I talk about down below or linked up above if you'd like to get more in-depth thoughts on, especially the vlog, when I talked about certain books in a vlog. But let's just dive into the stats. So like I mentioned, I read 6 books this month, and that was over 2,158 pages, and that was about 62-ish hours listened to. And that was over 4 audiobooks, 1 physical book, and 1 mixed book. And then for age category, they were all adult books. All of them. And the genres, there was only 3 this month. So we had 2 romances, 3 mystery, and 1 nonfiction. Ratings were pretty relatively normal for me. We had 1 5-star, 4 4-star, and 1 3-star. So even though I didn't read that many books this month, I am having a hard time remembering exactly what I thought about them. So this is going to be an interesting wrap-up. But the first one is The Gunslingers Guide to Avoiding Matrimony by Michelle McLean. This is the 2nd book in her Gunslinger series. I read the first one a couple of months ago, which was Hitched to a Gunslinger, which was seriously such a good book. This is the one that got 5 stars for the month. It's definitely my favorite book of the month, and it's what I started the month with. So this was a random buddy read of sorts that I did with my friend Taylor. We read the first one together as well. I'll leave her Instagram down below, as always. But this is a Western book, and we both are not huge fans of Westerns, and the first one blew us out of the water. And so when we discovered that the second one was coming out, I was so excited. I went into this thinking it was not related to the first one at all, but I was so wrong. It takes place in the same town, and it actually heavily involves the couple from the first book, which I loved so much. So this book follows our 2 main characters. We have Adam Brady and our main female lead, Nora Schumacher, I think is how you say it. And Adam's a gunslinger, not by choice, but a gunslinger, and he and the main male guy from the first book kind of know each other from the past, not pleasantly, and he is just trying to hide away. He's got a lot of warrants out on his arrest, and he's just trying to find a place to lie low and just kind of like live out the rest of his life in a very chill, relaxing manner. And so he comes upon this town called Desolation, which is the town that we met in the first book, and it's basically a place of misfits and people who are running from something specifically. All of them are there for a very specific reason. We don't know what they're all there for, but all of them are there for a reason. And so he's like, this is perfect. This is the place that I'm gonna hide out in. No one knows where it is. We've heard rumors of this place, but no one actually thinks it's real, and I found it. This is perfect. And then he discovers that the guy he's been running, one of the guys, it's Gray, the gunslinger from the first book, and him have a touch of an issue, and he's now the sheriff of this town, and he's like trying to find a way out. And somehow he accidentally gets married to a woman named Nora. Now I say accidentally because what ends up happening is so many people come to this town, and they really just want this town to be a place of refuge. They don't want a lot of people like unnecessarily living there. So when you come into the town, you have a month to either get married or fight a job. And those are your two options as far as staying in the town. And then if after a month, if you can't find either of these things, you basically have to leave. And so he stumbles across this mass ceremony where all these single people come together and they basically are getting married in this one spot. And so you find someone who also wants to get married and you get married, and that's a way of like basically keeping certain people in the town. And so he and Nora are actually having an argument, and they happen to say the right things at the right time and end up getting married. And so it's the two of them, him trying to find jobs so that he can stay in this town, and her trying to convince him to stay married to her because she needs a husband for very specific reasons. And he is convinced that, like, no, if I get attached, then like these warrants that are out for my arrest are going to, they're going to come hurt the person that I love. And of course things go according to plan. I love this book. Not nearly as much as the first one. I still think I love that couple more. I just feel more connected to them than I did these two. But I loved their relationship. They progressed relatively realistically as far as, I mean, there are some aspects of disbelief when you go into or just a romance in general, but historical romance. There's just some things that you kind of have to go in kind of leaving your expectations at the door. And this one blew them all out of the water, honestly. I really believed these two people like each other. I could really see the character arcs that were happening in this book and really could believe them. A lot of times I'll read books and one of the main characters will switch their thought process at the end of the book, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense why they would think that, or change their opinions on that if they were thinking a very specific thing for the whole book. Whereas these two, their character arcs were very realistic, and I just really liked their relationship. I think this author is a master of the banter and the conversations that our main characters have, and just having that like fun, flirty, argumentative style, which is something that I love to read about. And that was definitely something that I noticed within the first one, and it still plays very well within this one as well. I think that if you just want a fun rom-com, historical romance, even if you don't like Western, I still think this would be a good book for people, just because there are so many aspects of this that are surprising and things that I thought for sure I was going to hate and ended up loving. And so it's just the way that this author writes. I think she's an incredible writer. I want to read all of her stuff. I think she has a way with words to where like I believe our characters, and she has a way of making it romantic and having those smuttier scenes that you expect from a historical romance without going in the opposite direction of having way too many where there's no plot. Because I remember seeing something in one of, I think it was the other book that I read, where her synopsis basically said is like a relatively clean romance is what she's going for. Now it's not 100% clean because there's definitely some scenes, but there's a lot more tension between our characters rather than actual like scenes between our characters, if that makes any sense. So if that's more your thing or not your thing, it has a good mix of both. And I just really love these main characters, honestly. So yeah, this is perfect for people who want like rom-coms, who like Western movies. If you like Hallmark style, you know, movies with a little more substance and less cheese, then this is definitely for you. I just think everyone should read it, honestly. It's so good, and I really loved it. And so this was a random book that I just threw in at the beginning of the month, and so worth it. The next one is one that I've been reading over the course of 2 months, and I honestly don't remember everything that I thought about this one, so this is going to be fun. And that is Twice Tempted by a Rogue by Tessa Dare. This is the second in her Stud Club series. The first one in this one was One Dance with the Duke, which I believe we read in August? Is that right? It's been a few months. I think this was their September book, and we kept pushing it back and kept pushing it back because we couldn't find any audiobooks for it, which is really how we get through it. And finding time to physically read is tough. So this took 2 months for me to get through, and that is not because the book itself was bad. The first book in the series really didn't like. I think I gave it 3 stars. This one got 4. I really liked our characters in this book. So we follow our 2 main characters, Reese St. Moore, who is one of the guys in the Stud Club. And the Stud Club basically is this club of members who own a horse. The Stud Club only has 3 members now, and each of those members has a different romance in this trilogy, and so this is just the second one. And it follows him and this woman named Meredith. He is a duke. I don't remember what his title is, but he's someone big. He comes back to the town where he grew up, His dad was this title I can't remember, but his dad was this guy, and he wasn't the best dude, honestly. And so this town has just kind of made their way. They're just struggling by because they don't have this like gentleman to help them out. And so Reese comes back and decides that like he's going to take up, because he's been in the war, and so he's going to take up the mantle, and nobody really wants him there. And so he runs into this woman named Meredith, who actually knows from his childhood. She was the daughter of his stable master, and they kind of knew each other. Like they, I think, played a little bit as kids, but like she was always in love with him, and she now owns an inn, and she's a widow, and the two of them kick it off right away. And so I love their relationship. Again, I feel like this is a relatively realistic relationship. A lot of the scenes in here, a lot of the conversations remind me of the Tessa Dare that I've come to love through her later works. So this is where we first really get to see a little bit of her writing as we know it today. She's real funny. Like that's her thing, is she is a very humorous writer, and her early stuff doesn't show it as much. So we're really starting to see it show up in this one. And there was just something about these two characters. It's like a second chance romance. It is just, I just really enjoyed them as people. They were fun to read about, and Reese has a very like strong-willed personality, and so once he sets his mind on something, that's how things are going to be. And she's also very stubborn and strong-willed in her own respect, and so just seeing them bash heads a lot, and then like, again, a lot of tension in this book between our main two characters. I don't remember a lot of the like itty-bitty details, so I can't remember exactly if there was something about this plot or about how it ended or anything like that that like really didn't sit well with me. I just remember having a decent time. It just took me forever to get through, but I did give it 4 stars because I still enjoyed it. All right, the next one is the start of what turned into my Dark Academia vlog. So the next 3 books, well, 2 actually, I was gonna do 3, but I only did 2, are Dark Academia style books. And so feel free to check that video out if you'd like to know more in-depth thoughts on exactly how I felt about them and like the Dark Academia genre. Is that even a genre of sorts? The first one that I read in that video was If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is like a staple in the Dark Academia community. If you like Dark Academia, most likely people talk about this book as one of their favorites. So I felt like it needed to be in there. It follows this group of 6 kids in a conservatory of sorts. It's basically like fancy college, and they're in the theater department, and specifically they focus on Shakespeare. And something happens in the past when they were in this school, and this book takes place, it goes back and forth, but it takes place 10 years later, where our main character Oliver, who's one of these 6 students, has been in prison. And the guy, the detective who was on this case, does not think that he did it, and basically comes to him and is like, look, I'm retired. I've decided to no longer be a police officer. I think he ended up being the captain at one point. And he's like, I'm done. I'm retired, but something doesn't sit well with me on this case. Please tell me what actually happened. And so they agree that once Oliver gets out of prison, which happens right away, that he'll talk with this detective or ex-detective about the story. And so like the story is told in 5 different acts, and each act starts with him in the present day with this detective as they're like walking around the campus, and he's just kind of talking about some stuff, and then we shoot back into the past, and it's like him telling the story of what happened. And so you're learning along with the detective while Oliver ends up going to prison. And so something happened with these group of friends, and it's just the repercussions of that. And this is so pretentious in the sense of like, these kids are obsessed with Shakespeare. Shakespeare and acting are their life. And so everything they do relates to that. They basically just do a bunch of plays on campus. It's all about them getting cast, and then if like there's a guy who has always been cast as the lead, and at one point he's not, and he doesn't take it very well, and it's all of that kind of stuff. But even in like their day-to-day life, they just quote Shakespeare to each other. And if you are not like a big Shakespeare person, like I will admit that I've enjoyed the stories of Shakespeare. I don't particularly enjoy reading them, but like I've read a few for school, and like I understand Shakespeare's plays at a very like, I would say, basic beginner level. I wouldn't say like he's my favorite screen playwright or whatever. Like it's just, it's not I know enough, you know, and if you are even remotely the beginning of like learning Shakespeare, then like none of these things are going to make sense, because like again, they just quote Shakespeare out of nowhere and it's supposed to make sense in the sentence, and I don't understand Shakespearean language enough to get it. So there's definitely a lot of moments where I was just like, I was chugging along just hoping that it like context clues would tell me what was going on, because I didn't get it. But there were definitely some twists and turns. The fact that, you know, Oliver's in jail and we keep like, each time we check in with the present, we still don't know why and kind of what happens and why he ends up in jail until the very, very end. And so like you are on the edge of your seat. You're trying to figure out what's going on. I did end up caring for Oliver as a person. There's a couple characters in here that I started to care for, but most of them I was just like, you know, I'm good. You could no longer be a character and I would not be upset. So I don't know, like it's weird because like I know that pretentiousness is kind of rolled into what makes it dark academia. So like I'm not saying no to dark academia in the future, but it might not be my favorite thing in the world. There's definitely some aspects of this book that I was like, what, why? So like the mysterious elements of the story is what kept me reading, but as far as characters, as far as plot, is mostly just kind of okay. I think I ended up giving it 4 stars, but it is like the lowest of the 4 stars. Like it's almost a 3-star. It's so low. Because again, it did keep me intrigued. It did keep me interested. The first couple of sentences had me like interested in what was going on like right away. So it did have its way of like making me want to continue, but like in hindsight, was it worth my time? I don't know. So yeah, it was just kind of okay, you know? And then I followed that up with an even less okay book, and that is The Atlas Six by Livy Blake. This is the first, and I believe it's going to be a trilogy. The second one is out, and I'm kind of glad, I am glad that I stopped myself from buying the second one, because I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I really did like it. I got 3 stars because a lot of the world is interesting. The thing about the story is that the idea of this book and the synopsis and what the book is trying to do is such a fascinating story. I think it's really, really interesting, and that's what kept me on my toes. But as far as like the execution of it, I could have cared less. If I hadn't have been reading this for a book, for a video, and if I hadn't have gotten to like within the last 25% of the book, I would have DNF'd this, because I just couldn't care about these characters. So this follows 6 people who are all taking part in what's called the Alexandrian Society, and basically there's 5 spots and 6 people, so 1 person doesn't make it and is eliminated from this competition. And so the idea of this is that there's these 6 people and they're like vying for these 5 spots, but there's not really a competition aspect of this. It's just these 6 people studying different things, because like the Alexandrian Society is basically like the Library of Alexandria in a sense. I'm pretty sure that's like the same idea. And so like they go to this society, and like it's all about magic and stuff. Like everyone who's in it is magical and has different magical abilities. So all 6 people except for 2 people have the same magical ability, but they use it differently. And so technically all 6 people have different powers in a sense, and it just is a book of them studying stuff. Honestly, like there's not really a competition element. Like I expected there to be like maybe trials or things like of that nature, and that's not what this book is about. It's just these 6 people learning more about the world and more about people, and like how people react to certain things, how people react in certain situations, how people can become allies, and where that line gets a little fuzzy and stuff like that. And then the end just kicks it into high gear. So like everything you think you know is a lie. And that kept me interested, because I was like not quite sure what was happening. But almost all the conversations that these people are having are so theoretical that like I don't know what happened. Like I read the words, they clicked in my brain that they were words that I understood, but I didn't understand what they were trying to say. And there's just a lot. It felt very sciencey in a sense, even though it's really not scientific at all. But it's science in the fact of like they're studying the universe and how they're like their place in it, and if they can connect with people of different powers? Can these two people create something new? And then like at one point they're talking about time travel. Like it just gets really scientific really quickly, and it just wasn't something that my brain could process what was going on. So I really didn't like this, and I think I'm unhauling this book. Like I just don't feel like it's for me. The idea behind this book and the idea about these very different types of magic is fascinating, especially because one of these 6 has what he thinks is one thing, and then by the end of the book his idea of what his magical power is very different, and you do see like that kind of stuff. And then again, the ending is interesting, so like I have a question mark on whether or not I want to continue just because of how dramatic this book ended. But I read the synopsis of the second one and it just sounds like more of the same stuff, and I just don't think I can do that again. So it got 3 stars, and I'm questioning, again, super, super low 3-star, almost a 2-star low. So this was not for me, which makes me think that maybe Dark Academia isn't for me, but what do I know, you know? Because there's some things out there that still sound interesting. So I gave it a shot, but that was a no. That was a no for me. And then I followed that up with a book that I started for that vlog, but I A, ran out of time, and B, the more I think about it, the more it's not really a Dark Academia. I mean, no, I still don't think it is. And that is Portrait of a Thief, and this is by Grace DeLee. This is on a lot of lists if you go online as far as like what counts as a Dark Academia, but I'm not sure I would count it as a Dark Academia. However, this is a book about heists and art theft, and it's fascinating. It's also about colonization as well. We follow 6 college students who are like go to the Ivy Leagues, and they're all connected because they're like siblings or friends of friends or knew someone in college or something, and they're all like super, super smart, and they get hired by I wouldn't say the Chinese government, but like someone relatively high up, but it's more of a like personal billionaire of sorts. There are these, I think they're called dragon heads. They're these metal sculptures that were raided and stolen from China and are now in a bunch of different museums across the world. And they're on display, and they've not been given back to China. So this woman hires these 6 college students basically to go steal them back. And if they do, they'll get $10 million each. And so they're each from like, they've got their own stuff going on, but like each of them could use that money for something specific. And so you're following these people, and they're in this heist situation. They're in this group of like vigilante almost kind of thing where you were like trying to steal for the better, because like they steal these things, but they're not keeping it. They're doing it for government and because these museums have stolen all this art from China. And so they have a lot of reasoning behind it. Again, it reminds me of that TV show Leverage. I've talked about it a lot on my channel recently, but it's such a good show. But it's basically a show of these 5 criminals of sorts that each do something different, and they pull off heists to help people out. And so like they basically make the bad guy, the bad corporation, lose to help somebody out. And that's kind of what they're doing here. What I didn't know is that they were college students, and that's fascinating to me. And even certain things like they don't really have a hacker, they have a software engineer who is finding her way through trying to pretend to be a hacker, but like she's really not. She's just really good with technology. So this group is made up of, I just realized that they kind of have it here in the synopsis, and it's really interesting because we have a con artist who is a public policy major at Duke who can talk her way out of anything, a thief who's a pre-med student with steady hands just as capable of lock-picking, a getaway driver who's an engineering major who races cars in her free time, a hacker who's an MIT dropout turned Silicon Valley software engineer, and then like the head guy as well. So like it's really this ragtag group of students, and the best part about this is that they are all Chinese Americans. So they all do have a tie back to China, but a lot of them haven't been to China before. A lot of them, I mean, a couple of them have, but there's definitely a couple who like they're more American than Chinese, and they have that duality. And there's a lot of conversations in here about, you know, immigration, maybe not immigration itself, but being an immigrant and like what that looks like. And do they have, you know, this connection with China like some of the other people in the group do. You know, it's just some things like that. So there's definitely a lot of very interesting and deep conversations, but at the heart, it's a heist of people who don't know what they're doing, and that's like the best part. So it was just a lot of fun. I ended up giving it 4 stars, but nothing about this feels dark academia. It does feel very mysterious because like they are going on this journey, and I definitely want to gift this book to a few people because I think a few people in my life personally would really enjoy this. But overall, it was just a lot of fun, honestly, and a good mystery, a good heist story with a lot of extra levels and layers within it as well. And I just really enjoyed it. So yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. And then the very last book that I was able to get to this month was my nonfiction for the month. And that was this book, which is The Cases That Haunt Us. This is by John Douglas and Mark Alshaker. John Douglas is an FBI profiler who has worked on many cases. And so within this book, he basically takes like 5 or 6 cases, mostly unsolved cases, and tries to bring his expertise to it. So you've got Jack the Ripper, you've got Joe Bennett Ramsey, he does the Lindbergh baby story. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Or did I give this one 3 stars? No, I gave this one 4 stars. This one is one that takes a while to get into because it comes from, again, that kind of FBI mindset. So he does not hold back. He's not gory in his descriptions of what's going on, but he's not going to hide the fact that, like, some of these situations are rough, especially, like, Jack the Ripper, and, like, because that was the first one, so that's what's sticking out in my brain. Like, it's real gross, and so, like, he doesn't shy away from that. He doesn't shy away from any kind of theory. He kind of addresses every theory that has come through, whether it's historical, whether it's recent, whatever it is, he'll talk about a theory and why it does or doesn't work for this case. And so while he doesn't give any explanations of, like, I think it's this person specifically, he does have some cases where he's like, if I had to choose right now, I could choose one or the other, but he never comes to a conclusion. He basically says, here is what we're looking for, and here is, well, no, a couple of cases he does say, you know, I think the best, all of the stuff that we have now points to this person rather than this person, but he always phrases it in a sense of, like, I think it could be this person or someone very, very similar to them. So he doesn't ever say, like, this person's, like, I'm saying right now, staking my claim right now, this person did it. He's saying all the signs that I see point to this person or someone just like him or her. And so it was really fascinating for my true crime brain, which I do really enjoy. So it was really interesting because, like, I love listening to true crime stories and stuff like that, but I've never read them before. So I found this audiobook on Audible, which I think made it work the best because it was really fascinating to see all of these stories kind of come to life from someone who he worked on one of them. The very last story in the book he did actually work on, which was the Joe Bennett Ramsey case. But all of the other ones, a lot of these were historical, so he didn't work on them, but he has all the information right there, so he can give his expertise on it. And that's what was fascinating to me, was just someone who really knew their stuff, talking about all these different cases, and cases that I'd heard of, but maybe didn't know all the details about. And so he goes into all the details about it and kind of comes full circle as to, here's everything you need to know, and here's all the weird stuff that came out during the trial, and here's what I think. And it's really about him profiling people that he thinks could commit these crimes, and, like, talking about theories and stuff like that. So again, not the best read because, well, first off, true crime, but second off, like, he kind of, I don't want to say dehumanizes these cases because that's not what the right word, but he definitely looks at it objectively in the sense of, like, I can't think of these as people that I would know, because if I did, like, I get the same thing of, like, how I used to do news is, when I worked in news, you kind of had to separate yourself from the news you were reporting on, because if you got sucked into what you were doing, you weren't going to make it through the day. And so that's the way that I see him approaching these stories. So it's very abrupt, it's very factual, it's very stoic in a sense, because of, you know, this is his job. He has to kind of come into the story without having human attachments and human emotions tied to it. So at first I was like, I don't really know if I like this, but the more I read, the more I understood kind of where he was coming from, and the more that I could kind of not relate, because again, that's not the right word, but, like, I could understand why he was going about it the way that he was going about it. It was very clinical. It was very like, here's the facts, here's what I know, here's how I understand it. So if you like true crime and you'd rather have a bunch of shorter stories, this is really interesting. Definitely check into what the stories are about, because like there are so many trigger warnings for the actual murders in this book that I can't even begin to list them for you. But just know that like everything under the sun is probably talked about in this book, because these are some tougher stories, and not stories, but true crime cases and stuff like that. So while I found it very fascinating, it was a little abrupt a few times of like, oh, and we're talking about that. Interesting. Okay. But it came from a very interesting perspective, I think. I will say that I had to remind myself that this book was written in 2005 because, or 2005, 2006, because I read The Five, which is my nonfiction book that I read in October, which basically just talks about all of the women who were murdered by Jack the Ripper. And there's just some inaccuracies, I would say, in the way that he is referring to some of these women that this historian has cleared up since then. So I just had to remind myself that like this was written way before that. So like it was not, like he wouldn't know some of the stuff, you know? So there's just some stuff you kind of have to realize, like some things may have come out since then, because this has been written over 10 years ago. And that's not true. Is that true? Yeah, that's true. Time is weird. So just take it with a grain of salt, because there might have been things that have come out since then. But if you want like an FBI perspective on it, this is definitely a fascinating book to give you that. And that's it. Those are the 6 books that I read in the month of November. I hope you enjoyed this ridiculously weird wrap up, because I forgot most of my thoughts on a lot of these because it's been a while. That's not true. It's just been such a weird month that I haven't been wanting to read, so that when I did read, I apparently like blocked out some stuff. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I have mentioned in today's video, or if there's a book that you read in November that you want to talk about, or anything like that. Please feel free to leave all of your bookish thoughts down below. And if you want to comment something but you're not sure what to comment, I don't even know what emoji we should use. An open book or a stack of books, let's say, because it kind of reminds me of studying, which reminds me of dark academia. So do that. But if you liked this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to check all of that out, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!